Let me tell you something you might not want to hear, but you need to. The first step in dealing with toxic people is not about fixing them. It's about truly seeing them for who they are. Not who you hope they'll become, not who they once were, and certainly not who they pretend to be on Sundays or on social media. You need to see the real person behind the charm, the flattery, the guilt trips, and the silent treatments. That's the person you need to recognize. Toxic people don't wear name tags. They don't walk into your life announcing their intentions. No, they come with smiles, gifts, and promises. And if you're not careful, you'll miss the warning signs. Not because they weren't there, but because you were too kind, too loyal, too hopeful to call them out. You let your hope blind you. But here's the thing. There comes a time when you have to stop calling manipulation, miscommunication. You have to stop calling disrespect a personality trait. You have to stop calling gaslighting a misunderstanding. What's toxic is toxic, and you don't have to tolerate it anymore. If something drains your spirit, robs your joy, clouds your mind, or pulls you away from your peace, it has no place in your life. You were not created to live in confusion. You were not meant to tiptoe around someone else's anger or live in fear of their reaction. That's not love. That's bondage. And here's the truth. God's truth it will always set you free, but only if you're brave enough to face it. Recognizing the red flags doesn't mean you're being judgmental. It means you're finally being honest. You're waking up to what's been there all along. The hardest part of waking up is often realizing you stayed asleep for so long, simply because you didn't want to face what you might see. You knew something wasn't right, deep down, but you kept turning the other cheek not out of obedience, but out of fear. But now is the time to open your eyes. Now is the time to admit what your soul has known all along. Not everyone in your life is meant to stay. Some people are in your life for a reason, yes, but others are there to teach you a lesson. And the longer you ignore that lesson, the more painful it becomes. Don't let sweet words blind you to bitter patterns. Don't let shared history convince you to stay in unhealthy proximity. Don't let memories make you forget the misery. People will show you who they are, not in the big moments, but in the small ones. Watch how they respond when you succeed. Watch how they treat you when you set a boundary. Watch what they say when you're hurting. That's where the truth lies. It's not in their words, it's in their actions. And here's the hard truth. Some of us are so used to being disrespected, we started to call it normal. We've been trained to tolerate behavior we should have walked away from long ago. We've convinced ourselves, that's just how they are. Or maybe I'm too sensitive. Or if I just love them harder, they'll change. But here's the thing. Love doesn't cure toxicity. Love doesn't fix manipulation. Love doesn't excuse control. Love tells the truth. Love sets boundaries. Love walks away when peace is being strangled. And if you've been stuck in that cycle, hear me clearly. You don't have to stay there. The moment you recognize a toxic person for who they are is the moment you begin to take your power back. You start seeing clearly again. You start reclaiming your voice. You begin choosing peace over pleasing. And that, my friend, is the beginning of freedom. When God opens your eyes, He doesn't just show you what's wrong with them. He shows you what's been missing in you. He shows you the courage you forgot you had. He shows you the strength that's been buried under compromise. He shows you that life doesn't have to be lived in emotional survival mode. You were made for more than that. And if that voice inside you is whispering, "This isn't right," don't silence it. That's not paranoia. That's discernment. That's wisdom. That's God nudging you to pay attention, to stop overlooking, to stop excusing, to stop calling poison by any other name. Because no matter how sweet it looks in the glass, if you drink it, it will still kill your joy. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into how to protect your peace and discern the truth in every situation. Let me ask you this. How many times have you been in a relationship where you've tried to keep things together, tried to help someone, tried to fix the situation, only to feel like you're losing yourself in the process? I know it's hard to admit, but sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is create space. It's not about giving up. It's about choosing peace, about choosing yourself. It's about trusting that God will do the rest. We often hear that distance means defeat, that if we step away from someone, it means we've given up on them. But let me share a truth that might hit hard sometimes. The greatest act of love is stepping back, not to punish, but to protect. You're not being cruel by creating space. You're being wise. When someone continuously brings chaos into your life, when they wound you with their words and turn every interaction into a battle, you are not obligated to keep walking in that storm. There's a huge difference between carrying someone and being carried away by them. For far too long, many of us have been drowning, trying to keep others afloat, believing that enduring abuse is somehow noble. But when you allow someone to harm you over and over again, without setting any boundaries, you're not walking in grace. You're sinking in quicksand. Let's be clear, distance does not mean you stop caring. Sometimes, it means you care enough to stop allowing the damage to continue. You can forgive someone and still choose not to give them access to your life. You can wish them well and still walk in the opposite direction, because love without truth is not love at all. Some of the hardest decisions we'll ever make come from choosing peace over presence. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that being surrounded by people equals being whole. But the truth is, peace isn't found in the crowd. It's found in stillness. Even Jesus knew when to step away. He withdrew to pray, to reconnect with his Father, to realign his spirit. So why do we stay in places God has been calling us out of? Fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of judgment. Fear of guilt. But there is a profound difference between guilt and conviction. Guilt holds you in bondage, while conviction leads you to freedom. Guilt says, you owe them another chance. But conviction says, you've done all you can. Now, let God do the rest. When you create distance, it's not an act of anger, it's an act of alignment. You're not rejecting them. You're aligning your heart with God's peace. You're saying, I love you, but I won't let you steal my joy. I forgive you, but I won't let you break me. And guess what? Not everyone will understand your decision. Some may accuse you of being selfish, of not forgiving, of being prideful. Let them talk. Only you and God know the full story. Only you know the nights you cried, the prayers you prayed, and the patience you showed. You didn't walk away too soon. You held on longer than you should have. But now, as you step back, make sure you fill that space with God. Let Him minister to the broken parts of you. Let Him heal the wounds, rebuild your confidence, and remind you that distance isn't punishment, it's preparation. When God removes something, He is making room for something better. And the beauty of freedom is that it doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, it's in the silence. It's in the stillness. It's in that calm that you forgot was even possible. As the calm sets in, you'll look back and see this distance wasn't rejection, it was God's mercy. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into how to embrace this freedom and trust God's plan for your life. When you learn to embrace silence, you begin to experience the peace that God has intended for you all along. Sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is simply step back and let go of the need to explain yourself to others. When we constantly try to justify our actions and intentions to those who refuse to understand, we drain ourselves emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. But there's a powerful truth that you must hear today. When God protects you by placing distance between you and others, it's not a loss, it's a rescue. Have you ever felt like you're giving all of yourself to someone only to be misunderstood? You pour your heart out, you speak with love and patience, and yet they twist your words, accuse you of things you never said, and still, nothing is enough. This isn't a reflection of your actions, it's a reflection of how they choose to see you. The more you try to explain, the more you get entangled in their web of confusion. And the truth is, you don't owe anyone your constant defense when God has already declared your heart. The battles we often fight for others to understand us drain our spirit. It's not because we're doing the wrong thing, but because we're fighting a battle with someone who isn't looking for truth, they're looking for power. They want control, not understanding. And as long as you keep fighting, you'll stay stuck in a cycle of exhaustion. But there's a point where you have to realize that it's not about convincing them, it's about protecting your peace. It's a trap, And the enemy loves to use it because it wears you out, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It distracts you from what God is truly doing in your life. You were never meant to constantly explain yourself. You were not designed to perform for acceptance. Your identity is not in their opinion, it's in God's truth. And if they refuse to see your heart, that's not a reflection of you, but of their own blindness. Let them wrestle with their misunderstanding. Let God handle it. You continue walking in peace, because peace is powerful. There's a wisdom in knowing when to remain silent, and not the silence that comes from fear, but the silence that comes from knowing the truth. The kind of silence that refuses to argue with foolishness, silence that says, I've said enough, I've done enough, now I'll rest in what's true. Even Jesus, when faced with accusations, chose silence not because he lacked words, but because he knew their hearts were already closed off to truth. Sometimes, silence is the strongest statement you can make. Stop sacrificing your peace for someone else's misunderstandings. Let them have the last word. Let them say whatever they want. Some people fight because they're battling their own insecurities. Don't waste your energy on them. Truth doesn't need to panic under pressure. It stands firm because it knows that in time, the light will expose the darkness. And God, He sees it all. He sees the games they play, the lies they tell, the words they say behind your back. But more importantly, He sees your heart. There's a freedom that comes when you stop defending yourself and start trusting God with the outcome. This is where true freedom begins. You stop striving for peace through arguments, and you begin to rest in the peace that surpasses understanding. You stop talking and start praying. You stop striving and start trusting. And don't be surprised when people notice your change. You have changed, and it's for the better. You've shifted from needing their validation to walking confidently in God's affirmation. Stay tuned, because this journey toward peace and trust in God's timing is only beginning. ChatGPT said, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've just discussed. You've made incredible progress. You've gone from explaining yourself at every turn to trusting in God's plan for your life. You've moved from seeking approval to walking confidently in your calling. This transformation isn't about arrogance, it's about alignment. You've learned that not everyone deserves an explanation, and that's where real peace starts to grow. Now, here's the next step. When they twist your silence, let them. When they accuse you of pride because you've chosen peace, let them. When they question why you walked away without offering an explanation, let them. You see, you don't need to justify what God has already settled in your spirit. Your peace is a powerful testimony in itself. When you're surrounded by people who bring nothing but chaos, confusion, and bitterness into your life, you need to recognize one thing. Your peace is too precious to be placed in their hands. It's time to take back your peace and not allow toxic people to control the atmosphere of your life. Because here's the truth. If the enemy can't destroy you, he will try to distract you. One of the enemy's greatest weapons is a toxic spirit, someone whose sole mission is to drain your energy, steal your joy, and cloud your vision. But remember, God never called you to manage someone else's dysfunction. That burden is not yours to carry. You are not responsible for fixing people who refuse to change. You weren't put here to babysit someone else's bitterness or to negotiate with their negativity. Your role is to guard your heart. The Bible tells us clearly, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. When someone continues to pollute that well with manipulation, guilt, gaslighting, or anger, it is not unkind to protect yourself. It is wisdom. Setting boundaries is not rude. It is spiritual. Boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are gates to prevent destruction from entering. God created boundaries from the very beginning. He separated light from darkness, land from sea, and day from night. Even in the Garden of Eden, boundaries were established lines that should not be crossed. Yet, we've been told the lie that saying no is unloving. But love without boundaries becomes slavery. Mercy without wisdom becomes manipulation. Grace without truth becomes a game. And your soul is too valuable to play games with people who don't honor your peace. Sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is to step back. Let people feel the silence of your absence. You've tried talking. You've tried forgiving. You've met them halfway, even all the way. But all you've taught them is that your love has no limits and their behavior has no consequences. That's not grace. That's dysfunction disguised as kindness. You were never meant to live in survival mode, bracing for the next argument, the next lie, the next emotional storm. That is not love. That is not friendship. That is not family. That is bondage. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, freedom, rest, and restoration. There is no chaos, no fear, no walking on eggshells every time you're in the room. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. When someone keeps bringing confusion into your life, it's not a sign for you to hate them or curse them. It's a sign for you to remove yourself from their reach. So, the next time someone brings chaos into your life, remember this: it's time to let go. It's time to walk in peace and let God handle the rest. Stay tuned as we continue to explore how to embrace this peace and live fully aligned with God's plan for your life. The moment you let go, you begin to heal. And yes, it will hurt, especially if the person who's walking away is someone close to you, someone you've prayed for, cried over, and tried to help change. But here's the truth: change doesn't come from pressure. Change comes from the heart. And if that heart isn't ready, no amount of sacrifice from your side can save them. Only God can do that. Only the Holy Spirit can convict. Only grace can transform. Your role in this moment is simple. Step back and let God be God. You don't need to argue. You don't need to post a statement. You don't need to gather witnesses or win a debate. All you need to do is walk in truth and stay in peace. The fruit of your life will speak louder than any defense you could give. Peace will become your testimony. Your stillness will become your strength. And when they come looking for drama, only to find you resting in God, that's when you know you've won, not the argument, but the war for your soul. Some people might say, you changed. And you did. You stopped trying to fix what God never told you to carry. You stopped trying to prove yourself to people who are never going to see you clearly. You stopped sacrificing your peace on altars that were never holy. That is not weakness. It is wisdom. In that wisdom, you'll find a calm you didn't know existed, a stillness that no storm can touch, a strength that doesn't shout, but simply stands. Sometimes, the best response is no response at all. There's a sacred lesson you learn when you stop chasing people who keep walking away from your peace. A strength rises in your spirit when you stop begging to be seen, heard, and understood by those who've already made up their minds about who you are. And the truth is, you don't lose people when you stop chasing them. You lose chains, you lose anxiety, you lose confusion. And in return, you gain something far more valuable: clarity, freedom, and peace that only God can provide. In a world that tells you to go after them, don't let them leave, and make them understand. The Spirit says something different. The Spirit says, stand still, let the door close. Trust that what walks away was never meant to stay. Anything or anyone that must be forced to remain isn't rooted in love. It's rooted in fear, in control, in insecurity. True love doesn't have to be chased. It doesn't need to be convinced. It stands. It stays. It grows in truth, not manipulation. So many people are exhausted, not because they're out of breath, but because they're out of alignment, constantly running after toxic people, hoping for approval, hoping for a change, hoping for a different outcome from the same pattern. But chasing never brings peace. It only deepens your wounds. It only teaches others that you'll tolerate whatever they dish out as long as they don't walk away. And there comes a time when you have to pause and ask yourself, why am I running after people who keep showing me that they're not for me? Why am I spending energy explaining myself to someone who doesn't care to understand me? Why do I feel the need to prove my worth to someone who's already decided to devalue me? The answer lies in something deeper. Sometimes we chase not because we love others so much, but because we're afraid of what their absence says about us. We think, if they leave, maybe it means we weren't good enough. Maybe we failed. Maybe we didn't love well. Maybe it's our fault. And the enemy loves to sit in that silence, whispering lies into your weary soul, saying you're not worth staying for. But let me tell you, that's not truth. That's trauma. That's insecurity. And God didn't call you to live chained to the opinions of those who can't see your value. Not everyone who exits your life is a loss. Some departures are deliverance in disguise. Some people leave, not because you failed, but because your growth exposed their stagnation. As we journey through the lesson of walking away from toxic situations, let's embrace the power of distance and the wisdom it brings. Stay tuned as we explore more ways to reclaim your peace and live fully aligned with God's plan. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't on the outside, they're within. You've faced enough of those external battles, but the real struggle starts within, in your own heart and mind. When you've dealt with toxic people long enough, their voices start to echo in your head. You begin to question your strength, your kindness, your worth. You look in the mirror and wonder if the reflection you see is still the same person they tried to break. It's a haunting feeling, isn't it? But the truth is, you can reclaim your voice, the one that speaks truth over your life. The voice that isn't poisoned by manipulation, the voice that isn't silenced by fear, the voice that isn't distorted by someone else's bitterness. Toxic people have a way of making you doubt everything you already know about yourself. They twist your words, rewrite your history, and accuse you, not based on truth, but through their broken lens. And if you're not careful, you'll start to shrink not physically, but spiritually. You'll find yourself walking on eggshells, speaking less, dimming your light just to keep the peace. But hear me when I say, peace that requires you to lose yourself is not peace. That's bondage dressed up as harmony. You were never created to be silent in the face of lies. You were never called to live under the weight of someone else's dysfunction. When you've been called by God, you've been equipped with the authority to take your life back. You are empowered to speak up, to stand firm, and to step into truth with courage. And let me tell you, that doesn't mean shouting. That doesn't mean arguing with fools. That doesn't mean trading insults or exchanging words in anger. True strength is found in knowing when to rise above the noise, when to let silence speak louder than any argument. True courage is found in refusing to let toxic people dictate the course of your life. When you finally realize this, when you choose to walk in the strength God has already equipped you with, you will no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You will speak with the authority of someone who knows their worth, someone who has learned to protect their peace and guard their spirit. The freedom you find in reclaiming your voice will be like nothing you've ever known. It's not about getting back at the people who've hurt you. It's about standing firm in the truth that God's love for you is unshakable. So, the next time you're tempted to shrink or silence yourself to keep the peace, remember this: you were not called to live in the shadows of manipulation. You were not created to walk in the silence of insecurity. You were made to stand in your truth, to walk with your head held high, and to shine the light that God has placed in you. And remember, the moment you reclaim your voice, you reclaim your power. And that, my friend, is the moment everything changes. You stop apologizing for who you are. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Instead, you stand firm in who God created you to be, a person of strength, peace, and purpose. Toxic people will try to manipulate you, to pull you back into their chaos, to make you doubt your worth. They thrive on confusion, on you second-guessing yourself. But you, my friend, are not called to live in confusion. You are called to stand in truth, God's truth. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are the head and not the tail. You are more than a conqueror. When you truly internalize these truths, you won't need to explain yourself to those who refuse to understand. Your value is not determined by the opinions of those who can't see your worth. You stop chasing validation from people who are too wounded to see your light, and you start walking in assurance. The kind of assurance that says, I will not accept a role in your drama. I won't shrink down to your manipulation. I will no longer apologize for having boundaries. This version of you strong, clear, and unshakable will upset some people. Those who benefited from your silence. Those who preferred you insecure. Those who used to control your every move, they'll be irritated. But that's okay, because you're no longer living for their comfort. You're living for your calling. And that calling is too sacred to be tied to people who have no desire to grow. Your healing matters too much. You've been hurt enough, and God has already started the healing process. It's time to stop letting others reopen old wounds. Time to stop letting their dysfunction dictate your peace. Taking your power back doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming clear. It means deciding that you are no longer the emotional punching bag for someone else's pain. It means setting boundaries and saying, I love you, but I will no longer sacrifice my peace to prove it. The people who don't understand your boundaries, the ones who call you selfish for choosing yourself, the ones who try to guilt you for walking away, they don't know what it cost you to get here. They don't know the tears you shed, the prayers you prayed, the silent burdens you carried. But God knows, and He is lifting you now, not to hurt them, but to free you from the prison they kept you in. So walk tall, speak life, hold your peace, and never go back to the places God rescued you from. You are not who you used to be. You've grown, you've learned, you've survived. Now it's time to thrive. Not in spite of them, but above them. Because God's hand is on your life, and His purpose for you is greater than anything or anyone who tried to dim your light. And when you stop shrinking, you start shining.